Welcome to the Content 10X Podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Content 10X podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and this week's episode is all about measurement. So it's about measuring the effectiveness of your content repurposing. Now, I asked my audience on Instagram what they would like to hear me talk about more on the podcast, and I had quite a few people say that they'd like to find out a bit more about tracking and measurement of content. So that's why I thought it'd be a great topic for this week's episode. And I think it's only to be expected that you would want to measure the effectiveness of your content repurposing. So it's a really, really good topic to cover. So there's an age-old saying, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. I think it was first said by Peter Drucker, but there are quite a few people named as being the person who came up with that saying, so don't quote me. So it's if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Now, when I worked in big corporates as a management consultant, terms like data-driven decision-making and data-driven insights were frequently used. In fact, I attended training courses on data-driven decision making, and I taught other people on that topic as well. So there's no doubt that when you have data and when you have analytics that are available to you, you're in a very good position to measure the effectiveness of something. Now, I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't put all your trust in data, because data only tells one side of the story. And just because something can't easily be measured doesn't mean that it's not worth pursuing as well. So nonetheless, you can look at available metrics to review if there is an impact. And when you are going to work out how to measure the effectiveness and results of your content repurposing, I think what you need to do is ask yourself, what really matters to you? So that's the big thing to you. What do you want to achieve? And therefore, what do you want to measure? So you don't want to track everything, track what matters to you and what will help you in pursuit of your goals. So for example, if all your content repurposing efforts have two main goals, one is to have more website visitors and the other is to have more, let's say, email subscribers, then obvious data to track and measure are your website analytics and your email subscribers. However, it can be difficult to directly work out what results are due to content repurposing versus something else. So it can be difficult, but not impossible. So this week's episode, I want to focus on 5 ways that you can measure and track your content. So number 1 is Google Analytics and goals. So setting goals inside Google Analytics. So you can use Google Analytics to evaluate whether your repurposed content generated more organic traffic, leads, or social shares, engagement. So website traffic is essential because we all want as many of the right people as possible to find our website, right? There's lots of action that we'd like them to take on our website when they get there, like signing up to services, downloading free content, purchasing a product. But it doesn't matter how good our website is if no one visits it. Therefore, a lot of time when we create our repurposed content, so our core content and then our repurposed content, our big goal is to drive traffic to our website. So using Google Analytics to find out how much traffic your website gets is really useful. But what you also want to do is work out what content is bringing in the traffic. What are your most popular landing pages, your popular posts, etc. So you must pay attention to that. You must pay attention to where your traffic is coming from. So this is really important. For example, if you are spending a lot of time repurposing your content onto social media with the intention of driving people from social media back to your content on your website, then you want to review analytics and see if it's working. Are people coming from your social media to your website? If they're not, you might want to review your social media strategy and your content strategy for repurposing and creating content for social media. But I would like to say as well, bear in mind that just because your content on social media is maybe not driving a lot of traffic to your website, maybe not as much as you would hope, that doesn't mean that you should consider it to be a waste of time, because there are other benefits of your social media content as well as generating website traffic. For example, for me, social media is largely ultimately about building brand awareness, particularly my personal brand. So whilst my repurposed content on social media doesn't always directly link to my website traffic, I don't consider the efforts to be a waste of time. For example, I see lots of benefits when it comes to engaging with my audience, and that engagement, can build trust over time and have all sorts of positive impacts that don't immediately seem apparent from just looking at data, which is what I mentioned before in terms of not, putting all of the emphasis on data and thinking of the bigger picture of things as well. So other analytics that you need to look at in Google Analytics are your bounce rate. So that's the rate at which people leave your site. If you have a low bounce rate, it means that people are liking your content and staying. And a high bounce rate means that they arrive on your site and leave very quickly. So if you're a dab hand at Google Analytics, or if you have someone in your team who is, you can set up specific goals in order to see what content led to visitors taking certain action. So in this instance, if you decide what the goal is, whether it's filling in a form, looking at a particular web page, staying on a page for a certain amount of time, signing up to your email newsletter, whatever action you want visitors to take, you can define that as a goal within Google Analytics. Then you're able to track the goal. For example, you can see what pieces of content help you to achieve that goal, and you can understand what traffic sources lead to achievement of your goals. So that's a really good way of seeing if your content and your repurposed content are leading to the achievement of your ultimate goals on your website. So that's number one. Website analytics are really useful for working out whether content repurposing has an impact. So number two is search. So when I talk about the benefits of content repurposing, something that you often hear me refer to is that it will help you with your SEO and lead you to being found by search engines. So if you're working out whether your content repurposing efforts have an impact, one thing that you may want to measure is how well your content performs in search results. So I mentioned just previously that your website analytics provide you with a view of how many people are finding you via search, but there is more that you can do to measure this. So today, basically with our smartphones with us pretty much all the time, whenever we have any kind of question or want to look anything up, we grab our phones and we go onto Google and we search that. So we're definitely in an information age and we're constantly searching online. Now, when people search on search engines, most people click on results from the first page. So maybe the first result, or at least on the first page. So it's important to try and ensure that our content performs well in these searches. So to review how you perform against the keywords that you want to rank for, open an incognito window or private window in your browser and perform a search. Review whether you appear in the top 3, which will be amazing, the first page, which is still very, very good, or do you appear on other pages? And then in that case, maybe you have some work to do. So if you embark upon content repurposing with that goal of improving your SEO against particular keywords, and this is something that you can measure over time, perform a review of your performance against the keywords that you want to rank for. Then when you're repurposing your content, for example, creating written content based off your videos or your podcasts, focus on optimizing against those keywords. And it really will help if you gain links to content from respected sites as well. This will increase your website authority online. So can you repurpose your content into guest articles and features on other respected sites that will link back to your site? That would be a really, really good thing to do for your SEO. So when you review how you perform against your desired keyword searches over time, I suggest that you maybe do this every 30 days and take time to gain authority online. It does take time to rank high against particular keywords, so don't expect any kind of overnight magic. But if this is one of your key focuses for content repurposing, then devise a plan to make it work and a plan to measure the results, and remember to be patient. Okay, so that's search. Then social media is number 3. So there's lots of goals that you may have on the various social media platforms when it comes to repurposing content. Now, I've already discussed that when talking about website analytics, if you repurpose your content onto social media with the intention of driving traffic to your website, then you can measure this in Google Analytics. You can go directly to the acquisition section, then social, then network referrals, and you can see which social media platforms are bringing in traffic, how much, and all of that. So remember that data only tells one side of the story though. So whilst it is very important to know whether your content on social media leads to website visitors, that may not be your main goal with social media. As I mentioned before, for me personally, it's about building brand. It's about having engagement with my audience and building relationships and building trust with people. So some of those things are harder to measure, but that can all be achieved through using social media in the right way, basically. But nonetheless, there are definitely some things that you can track on social media, like the number of followers, number of likes and shares, the rate of engagement on your posts. So if you are creating, say, repurposed posts from podcasts or videos onto social media, you may want to start to track things like that and see what's happening with that repurposed content. And you can measure all of this within the social media platforms themselves via their built-in analytics, which can be quite good, but you can also measure your content marketing success and all of that data on third-party tools as well. For example, Buffer, SmarterQ, CoSchedule, Meet Edgar, Agora Pulse, to name just a few. So they all provide really good data and analytics on how your content performs. And it is really important to keep track of what's working and what's not working on social media. What are people engaging with? What do they like? What do they comment on? What do they not comment on, not engage with? And just being really aware of that. And then making sure that you're dynamic and responsive, changing your approach to do more of what is working and less of what is not working. And then number 4 is podcast, video, email, CRM data that can be available to you depending on what your core content is. So if you are repurposing content for the purposes of, say, getting more podcast downloads because you are a podcaster, then of course the analytics provided by your podcast hosts are going to give you that data so you can measure your podcast downloads and you can review your repurposing efforts to see if you're getting more podcast downloads as you are completing more content repurposing. It's not going to be easy and you might not be able to directly link that, but it's still, if you're creating lots of content based off your podcast, then you want to be looking at podcast downloads if that's your main goal, to increase those podcast downloads. And remember as well, it's not all about downloads as well. It's really important to know that people did actually listen to it, that they listened to all of it as well, and they got value from it. So I'm going to do a separate podcast episode on this, but a metric that Apple Podcasts present to us is called average consumption. And this enables podcasters to measure how much time and attention listeners are giving to their podcasts. And Spotify have something similar called episode performance, I think, in their analytics. Stitcher have something called average completion rate. But all of this, it's about, are people actually listening to the podcast, not just downloading it, but listening to it and getting value from it? And that is a really important metric. Now, similarly, if you create video content and you're repurposing your content in order to get more video views, then you can review your video analytics. So look at how many views you're getting, but also, again, paying attention to the audience retention statistics too. Are people actually watching it for longer than just a few seconds? And are they getting value from it by sticking around and watching the whole thing? Then maybe your ultimate goal with your repurposing efforts is actually to grow your email subscribers. And then that's a metric that you can measure within your email service provider or CRM, whatever you may use, like ActiveCampaign, Aweber, ConvertKit, Infusionsoft, whatever you use, you can track that data. Plus, website analytics can be really useful in helping you measure the effectiveness of content on whether people sign up to your email list. So your email service provider will be able to provide you with data to track and measure, and then you'll be able to determine which lead magnets brought in the most leads and which content on your website brought in the most leads to ultimately become email subscribers. Then you can look at open rates and determine if the leads are engaged as well. So again, as I mentioned, for podcasts and for video, it's not just about being a subscriber, it's about being an engaged subscriber as well. That's what's really important. And then number 5 is actually really a bucket that I've put loads of other things into, which is just that there are less quantifiable indicators that you want to bear in mind. So when it comes to measuring and tracking the effectiveness of your content repurposing efforts, it's just not always about the analytics and data, as I mentioned at the start. Data-driven insights can be really great, but data doesn't always tell the whole story. There may be other benefits of content repurposing that can't be measured by numbers, stats, and analytics dashboards. For example, by creating lots of repurposed content, you're reaching more people, you're connecting with them in different ways. You never know who's watching, reading, and listening to some of your content. And it can result in things like being invited onto other people's podcasts and shows, which has happened to me through my content. It can result in being asked to speak at events, which again has happened for me. The more content I've put out there, the more I've then started to be invited to speak at events and to, go on people's Facebook Lives, go on people's video shows, go on people's podcasts and things like that. So these are all other results of creating lots of content, great content, and then repurposing your content. Building a brand, getting in front of more people via your content and via the opportunities that can lead from your content, like speaking, being guest on podcasts, and all of that has real business benefits. You can get so many leads from that awareness that you build, which can turn into ultimately growing your business. So there's all of those additional less quantifiable indicators of your content repurposing. So in conclusion, when it comes to tracking and measuring the effectiveness of your content repurposing efforts, it all comes down to what really matters to you. To understand what really matters to you, you need to have goals that are clearly defined, plus you need to then align your goals with your ultimate business goals. So you have your content goals, then you have your business goals, and everything needs to be aligned. And your goals may be quantifiable, and then determine what data you can track and how you're going to measure that. But then some goals may be less quantifiable and more qualitative. And in that case, you'll just need to work out other ways to determine the success factors for those metrics. So I've said it before, don't track everything, track what matters to you and what will help you in pursuit of your goals. So that concludes this week's episode of the Content 10X podcast. If you would like any help with your content repurposing, then don't hesitate to get in touch with us at Content 10X, because we offer a fully done for you end-to-end content repurposing service for podcasters, Facebook Livers, video content creators, and basically anyone who creates core, consistent quality content. We would work with you to repurpose that content on a regular basis. So if you'd like to get in touch, just go to content10x.com or email me, Amy, at content10x. You can also catch and engage with me on all of the social media platforms with the handle at content10x, and I really look forward to seeing you there. So thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.